The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another great webinar from cpaacademy.org. My name is Vaughn Smith. I will be your moderator for today's session on 7 tips to expand your margins and increase revenue with CAS. I think I'm saying that. Yeah. Okay. Client Accounting Services. Perfect. Yay. Okay. See, I'm learning something as well. So we are so glad that you guys have taken time out of your day to spend the next hour with us. We have some great information from a fantastic presenter. We really appreciate you all being here with us today. I want to make sure that you can hear me. You can also see the title slide of the presentation. I'd like for you to say hello, tell us where you're tuning in from. You can do that in the questions panel. It's on your GoToWebinar interface. Go ahead and expand that out and say hello. Hello, Michael. Good to see you again. Got Jerry from Arizona. Oh yeah, did I tell you to tell us where you're tuning in from? So go ahead and do that too and say hello. So it looks like we've got Santa Rosa, California. We've got California again. We've got Arizona, Louisiana. All right, it looks like we've got everybody coming in just fine. So thank you for letting me know that everything is going all right. If you're having any issues during this session, please go ahead and let me know in that questions panel. There are quite a few of you, so it might take me just a minute to get around to you, but I will go ahead and get to you as quickly as possible. This session does qualify for 1 CPE credit. You need to remain logged in for at least 50 minutes, but stay for the whole hour. And polls will pop up throughout your screens. You need to go ahead and answer the polls. In that blue GoToWebinar poll box that will come up on your screen where the slides are, make sure you go ahead and hit that submit button so it registers your response for your credit. Let's see, where are we at now? We are at handouts. Okay, if you would like to follow along, we have a handouts panel that you can download the slides, and that way you can, well, yep, follow along. I said that already. They are also in your CPA Academy account, and in that account as well, you'll see your CPE credit issued to you within about 24 hours, and you'll also find a recording of this session. If you have questions for our presenter, go ahead and put those into the questions panel. And if we do not have time to answer your questions during the session, they do receive copies afterwards so they can see any items that may have been missed. So now, help me in welcoming our presenter, Ed Warren. It is all yours. I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Vaughn. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. I am really excited to be doing my inaugural CPE webinar with CPA Academy. I've presented this content before, but this is my first time on this platform. I've also done it for CPA Firm Alliances. So I'm really excited to be with you today, and I'm really excited to talk with you about CAS. It is one of the most exciting and fastest growing elements of traditional accounting firms. Certainly, it is also growing as standalone accounting services providers are all over the web, all over venture capital, literally it's just a fast growing segment. Yesterday, a gentleman I met at the CPA.com conference in Bellevue, Washington last year posted on a group that I'm a member of that CAS went from not even showing up in firm revenues a few years ago to showing up as 10% of revenue in major firms. That's really exciting in my mind. It validates the work that I've been doing and the work that many firms have been doing to grow their practices over the years. My history is in sales and marketing. Believe it or not, I actually got an accounting degree when I finished college. But after 2 years of private accounting, I decided that sales was where I wanted to be. I've spent over 8 years in the accounting sector. 6.5, 7 of that in top 200 firms, a top 200 firm and also a top 100 firm. In my last job in a firm, I was doing business development and focused primarily on CAS practices. And in that time, I closed my largest CAS deal, which was a $16,000 a month engagement. And with installation fees, we had $225,000 a year in first-year revenues. So I love this space. I think it provides a tremendous service for clients in that you are providing advisory services to your clients and you're helping them think positively and forwardly about how they run their enterprise, how they run their business. Where in a traditional accounting and situation with small businesses, they spend most of their time looking in the rearview mirror. So I have asked Vaughn to hold questions to the end because I'm hoping to cover most of your questions during the presentation, but if we don't get them today, I will certainly respond in email. What you're seeing on this slide is my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me via email directly. Follow me on social media. I didn't get it on the slide, but I started a client accounting services growth group within LinkedIn, and in a follow-up email that you'll be getting from me sometime in the next few days, I'll have links to both that LinkedIn group as well as the Dynamis company page. So I encourage you, if you are a follower of LinkedIn, to join us on those channels. The first of the 7 tips that I'm providing or I'm suggesting for you is finding your niche. I will refer a lot to CPA.com because they have really been a leading force in getting CPAs and CPA firms engaged in the client accounting services arena. If you are running or contemplating starting a CAS practice, I strongly recommend that you attend some of their workshops. They have a 2-day workshop. They also have tons of reference materials on the CPA.com website. One of their recommendations, and frankly one of mine, is if you are starting a practice, really think seriously about doing a niche and not being sort of what I would call an omnivore. You know, there are people who will take any business that comes in the door. I strongly recommend that you specialize in a niche that you already understand and serve well. And if that happens to be nonprofit or small and emerging businesses or veterinary practices or dental practices, pick that niche because your specialized knowledge in running a veterinary practice or a dental practice is going to serve both you and your clients well because of the expertise that you bring to the table. Interestingly, when you look at the statistics of where most firms are with client accounting services practices, professional services, which could be lawyers, engineers, architects, etc., is actually the biggest identified niche. Second to that is small business. I know a lot of CPA firms call their small business practices entrepreneurial services. And then finally, you'll see nonprofits there. I happen to live in the Washington, D.C. metro area, and definitely one of the biggest sectors, the only question is whether it's second or third after government, is nonprofits or government contractors. And so nonprofits was a big focus of the practice that I served when I was in this work inside a firm, and it's also a big focus of the firms that I'm prospecting today. I mentioned having the industry expertise and forward thinking because unlike running an internal accounting department where you may be focused on only, or principally on month-end close and providing backward-looking reports, as a CAS provider, you're providing business advice to your clients. So you want to have dashboards and other tools available for them so they understand what their cash flow is. They understand, if they're in the restaurant trade, what their table turns look like, and all of the informative metrics and KPIs that help them understand the health of their business. The last bullet point on this slide is insight and foresight. And what I would say from that perspective, as an advisor to your clients, you want to give them the tools that help them understand where they need to be 12 months, 18 months, 36 months down the line. The next question, certainly, if you've already identified a niche where you feel like you can provide differentiable value, is figuring out who the best prospects are in that niche. I did some searching when I first put this class together because I years ago got a call from a prospect that runs what are they called? Therapeutic riding centers. And there are hundreds of those in the country. But the challenge, if you want to specialize in a specific nonprofit, you want to find a market that's large enough to support your practice and your revenue and income requirements. But you also want a market that's big enough that you can really develop an expertise that's differentiable. What I found when I was doing this research on therapeutic riding centers is There are a couple of hundred of them in the country. I couldn't identify more than a handful that had more than $500,000 in revenue. So it didn't seem like a great fit for accounting services practitioners. Conversely, in my market, I know from looking in GuideStar and looking at doing some searches in that database that there are approximately 10,000 professional associations in the Washington metro area. I was able to find more than half of those have 5 million or more in annual revenue. And all of a sudden, the clouds opened, there's a sweet spot. And that was the market I chose to pursue. And I just closed an opportunity recently with a $5 million trade association. This one turns into a $7,000 a month ongoing engagement. So figure out who you want to engage, understand that that market is large enough to meet your requirements and that the needs are specialized enough that you can differentiate yourself. Next up is number 2, have a growth plan.
Hey, Ed.
Yes.
Before we get into tip number 2, do we want to go ahead and launch our first poll?
Oh, yes. Let's do that. I'm sorry. Thank you.
That's okay. That's all right. Let's go ahead and put that on your screens now. So poll number 1 is up. We're asking, how old is your CAS practice? And if you're new to CPA Academy, we leave our polls up for about 60 seconds to allow you to register your votes. Don't forget to hit that submit button. And Ed, a quick question.
Yes.
You said therapeutic riding as in like horseback riding?
Yes. Equestrian centers, exactly.
Awesome.
And that
was more of a personal question.
Yeah, no, I don't ride. My wife grew up riding horses, so it's.
I used to jump, hunter jumper. So
oh, wow.
Horse.
Interesting.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyways, back to our poll. Sorry, guys, but I just want to let you know we got about 10 seconds on our poll, and we'll be closing this down in 3, 2, and 1. Thank you guys for your responses. And Ed, back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Vaughn. So next up, have a growth plan. And when I say this, I'm not necessarily talking about a marketing plan. I'm really talking here more about how are you going to go to market? How are you going to get this baby launched? And what I'm finding as I talk to firms, a lot of them are still doing write-up. I wish I had this as a polling question because I think it's a great one. How many of you are still doing tax write-up work for your small and entrepreneurial clients? My guess is that it's probably 50% of you that are in CPA firms. I know we've got a mix of people from firms and not from firms. But a number of firms that I know from my time in the industry are still doing write-up work, and it takes a ridiculous amount of time during busy season for them to do a year's worth of financials because the clients aren't using any kind of accounting software. So where you may want to go is you may want to start your accounting services practice by mandating that your ongoing tax clients, if they don't have their own accounting software and they aren't doing their own work, is you mandate that they engage you both for their taxes and ongoing client accounting services work. And I can talk more with you on an individual basis about how you might want to do that, how you might want to price it. But just a quick example, one of the firms I used to work for still has hundreds of these clients. Most of them have, individual or family and business tax returns that generate about $3,000 a year in revenue, and then they end up charging about $1,500 or $2,000 to do the write-up work for the business. What they are thinking of doing is, changing that to a $500 a month engagement that they bill monthly. And all of a sudden, instead of, doing all of this work in busy season, you've got a steady revenue stream through the year. And when it's time to do the taxes, you're pretty close to your trial balance already, instead of having to start with retrofitting all that data and dropping it into QuickBooks Online or whatever package you use. So that may be the way to go to market. Many small firms in small markets or Metropolitan markets do payroll services for their clients. This may be another way of using CAS as this is a bad analogy, but a gateway drug for building that CAS practice. So there are lots of ways that you can go to market quickly, and I encourage you, if you haven't had these thoughts or conversations with the folks on your team, think about what are the easiest ways to go to market and to get some traction. And I think I referenced this earlier. CPA.com's recommendation when you go to that 2-day CAS workshop is to pick your niche. And I think for most firms, they can easily identify whether ag is one of their niche, whether nonprofits are part of their niche, whether employee benefit plan audits, peer reviews. I mean, some of them don't lend themselves to CAS, but certainly if you're doing entrepreneurial business services, if you do a lot of audit work in the nonprofit space, you may want to just look at your book of business and see who are your problematic audit clients because they have trouble putting together financial statements. And that may be the place where you want to start building your CAS practice. So again, getting back to the basics, start with a niche that you know and understand and maybe where you have a thought leader or two. Grow that niche, master it, and rinse and repeat. And then you build that first niche, which might be in this case audit. And let's say you have also a large share of clients who are multi-unit quick serve restaurants. That could be your second niche. And again, build that and grow. Next up is a staffing plan, and this is really the area where the rubber can meet the road in terms of generating additional margin and profitability for your practice. Depending on what your staffing model, every firm has a different model. I've worked at firms that don't have paraprofessionals. I've worked at firms that do. Typically, they are doing a lot of the write-up work because that's a part of what they do as bookkeeping staff in firms. I also know there's a large percentage of firms out there that do CAS work that only do that with CPAs or CPA track folks. In the DC market, a CPA or CPA track candidate with 2 years of experience is going to command a salary of between $80,000 and $85,000 a year plus benefits. So that's a very expensive person to do accounts payable and accounts receivable, but that's how some models or how some firms deploy and staff their teams. This is where you can really find the savings, and this is one of those standard questions you get in Accounting 101. Do you make or do you buy? And in this particular model, you've got to decide how you want to staff your team. Are you doing that all with internal resources? Or do you want to look at farming out some of the less valuable, the less advisory work? This is I won't say typical. This is one model for staffing and accounting services practice. And you can see here accounts receivable, accounts payable, and payroll on the bottom, accounting manager, virtual controller, virtual CFO, and then sort of the practice leaders and the partners. That's how a lot of firms are structured. As I was saying before, for firms that don't have paraprofessionals, that bottom row is going to be your staff seniors. And that's really where, as I was saying, you can look at some of the savings. I am using data for my metro area, Washington, D.C. This is going to be different in everyone's market, but these are what I see typically as labor rates in this market for a bookkeeper, for a supervisor, for a controller, and for a virtual CFO. Those are the rates without benefit load. So you figure you're going to add another 30 to 33% for the hourly rate with benefits. If you look at those numbers with an outsourced model, you can literally cut the cost in half for bookkeeping. So instead of $19 an hour, you're actually paying $9. Now, depending on how you structure your engagements and what your fees are and how competitive your pricing is, you could have a significant amount of flexibility in pricing if you're using an outsourced bookkeeping model. There we go. This is really the nuts and bolts of the presentation. So if you want to see where the savings come, in the original diagram that I showed you that had labor rates for 19 an hour for bookkeeping and so on, this is a scenario. And again, I'm doing this without factoring in benefit load, but this is not an atypical scenario of what I would call a mid to large sized CAS engagement for my metro area. So this is about a $14,000 engagement with a traditional staffing model that relies on firm staff and paraprofessionals. These are the margins and the gross margin, margin points in the gross margin dollars you could recognize in the standard model with standard staffing and in various versions of outsourcing with outsourced bookkeepers and with outsourced controllers. I would ask you to focus on the first four columns because those are really the meat of what we're talking about. But what you can see when you look at these is almost a $2,500 difference in go-to-market pricing if you need to be in a competitive situation. Obviously, that means your gross margins are going to go down relative to the original pricing with full-time staff. But you can see from that, that gives you a great deal of flexibility in your cost. And again, if you're spreading this over multiple accounts, this could mean that you either don't replace a bookkeeper when they leave, or if you don't have bookkeepers in your model and you're just using staff seniors, you may decide that you want to have your staff seniors just focus on month-end close and higher level advisory work and have a $9 an hour resource doing payables, receivables, time entry for payroll, expense reconciliations, and bank reconciliations. So moving on, sales and marketing plan.
Hey, Ed.
Yes. Oh, is it time?
Yeah, I have after slide 18 to interrupt you for a poll, if that's okay.
Okay, sorry about that.
No problem, just keeping it on here. Let's go ahead and get that poll number 2 up. And just want to ask, what are your CAS revenues? We did have a quick question that I think we could pop in here. Like,
Sure.
somebody's asking, like, is doing work for, say, small businesses, would that be considered a niche?
Yes. I don't know if I said this before, but many small and mid-sized firms have, some of them call small business services, some of them call them entrepreneurial services groups. I've heard a bunch of different names, but yes, whether it's small businesses, sole practitioners, I would probably classify anything under, say, 5 million in revenue as a small business, and that number could go up. I mean, there are a lot of variables, but yes, absolutely. So I made contact with some folks in South Central Pennsylvania where I used to work. Several of the firms that I've prospected there have what they call variably entrepreneurial business services or small business services, and they'll do everything from payroll to payables and receivables, essentially full outsourced accounting department solutions. And again, it varies in price based on complexity and transaction volumes. One of the things that I'll say is very useful in that CAS 2-day workshop is pricing models. You need to be able to base your pricing on some historical or predictive numbers. And what I've seen most often is that people either ask the clients to provide data on all of their transactions, or they do a formal assessment process. And that assessment process for many firms is billable. That assessment could be $5,000. And in that assessment, somebody from the firm either goes to the client sites or dials into their instance, let's say, of QuickBooks Online, looks at payable volume, receivable volume, expense tracking and coding volume, payroll journals and time entry and bank reconciliations, number of company issued credit card transactions, the number of employee owned credit card transactions, and calculates what the time at various levels are. I think when you really dig into this, it's going to be very much like pricing audit work or pricing tax work. It's just a new service line in many firms. So I hope that answers your question. If not, please drop something else into the box and we'll come back to it later.
Great. Thank you so much.
Sure. All right, moving on. Marketing and sales resources. This is the stuff that gets my propeller rolling, or spinning, I should say. We talked about how important it is from a differentiation and expertise perspective to pick a niche that you know, and to pick an area of focus that you know, and whether that's small business or architecture and engineering or construction, pick it because that is going to be one of your differentiators going forward. What you also need to do, again, depending on the size of your firm, generally firms that are between 50 or at 50 or larger typically have a marketing resource in-house. If you don't have a marketing resource in-house, I am happy to refer you to some folks who do marketing and business development work for firms. You need to understand who your best consumers are. You need to be developing content, whether it's in the form of blogs or newsletters or email campaigns, that are going to help you attract those folks to your practice and to you. If you go to the Dynamis website, you will see content out there that's targeted at people who run accounting services practices or CAS practices. What you are going to want to do as an accounting service provider is you're going to want to have content that targets the kinds of businesses that you want to attract. That could be blog posts, that could be podcasts, that could be ebooks, it could be a number of things. I can't think of the name of the firm right now, but I know of several firms that are dental niche specialties, dental and medical, and they have tax planning resources on their websites. They have CAS specific information on their website. They have KPIs and all kinds of information. And what you want to do from a marketing perspective is you want content that will yield the kinds of prospects you want to see coming to your website, coming to your blog, consuming your social media. And that is not necessarily for the faint of heart, and it is not necessarily something that is going to come naturally to someone that's running a CPA practice, but these are the kinds of things that you're going to need to do to attract the kinds of clients that you're looking for. Interestingly, as we talk about sales, some of what you will also have to do is you will have to work on your presentation skills and the presentation documents you put together. Because CAS is such a different service than traditional tax and assurance work, you're going to have to look at it differently. I am far from an expert on value pricing, but one of the things I'll recommend is that you, instead of just talking about price and worrying about how much something costs, think in terms of the value you're able to provide. And this was particularly important in a deal that I was able to close earlier this month. I was partnering with a client to deliver accounting services to a $5 million association. In this case, they have a longtime controller who is 73 years old. He's not actually going to the office because nobody's going to the office these days, but this guy was on a base salary of $130,000 a year plus benefit load. So that took him into 170, 180 grand salary range with benefits load. We looked at the work that the controller was doing, segregated out some non-accounting stuff, and figured out that we would be able to provide the services that this client was needing for $7,000 a month. So at the end of the day, these guys went from a full-time employee that they were paying well over 150 grand with benefits to an $84,000 annual engagement, getting full financial statements, getting actually not compliance work, but supporting documentation for the 990s, multiple corporate entities, because there was the association, there was a political action committee, there was, so long story short, even though they price shopped us in this particular opportunity, we were able to give them essentially the same value that this long-term employee had provided for about half the price. Um, Again, you guys and ladies know the markets you're in. You know what the competitive pressures are. I'm not going to presume to know what you're dealing with, but this may be a way of effectively pricing and presenting the value of what you do as an accounting services providers. This particular slide, again, a lot of the stuff that I'm sharing comes from an accounting services benchmarking report that was published by CPA.com. This lists barriers to sales success for accounting services firms. And the reason I went through that long preamble about value pricing and how to price your work is if you were not setting the right expectations for your clients on both the value that you bring and what they can expect to pay, you might, and you can't see them because these are, because I'm not on camera, but I'm doing virtual air quotes right now because when I hear somebody is price sensitive, my response is not price. They don't understand the value. If I don't understand the value, the price is always going to be too high. But if I know as the CEO of an organization, whether it's a trade association or a mid-sized manufacturing company, that I can replace a full-time employee or better yet, a full-time team for a fraction of what it would cost me, then I've probably done my job. And again, relatively speaking, you've got to figure out how to structure your pricing and structure the story that you're telling to your clients about what you do and the value that brings. The other two leading factors were clients don't understand the value of CAS. And again, if you're talking about the dashboards and the key performance indicators that you provide, if you're talking with and sharing with your clients cash flow calendars that go 6 months into the future based on anticipated billings and anticipated expenses, these are the kinds of things that are helping clients keep their doors open or keep their doors open virtually, since many of them aren't in their businesses today. These are the things that help people survive in an economic downturn, and there's value for that. I can have a conversation with you about what a controller costs and what an outsourced solution costs, but you guys are CPAs, many of you are partners in firms, you understand the value of peace of mind. And that's a big part of what you're providing with these services as well. Also an interesting slide, and again, it falls in the sales and marketing area. I mentioned to you that you should be talking with your existing clients about engagements for their write-up work. So converting that $1,500 of write-up work and that $3,000 business and individual tax return into an ongoing, let's call it $4,000, $400 a month engagement for CAS that includes both the tax work and the write-up work at $400 a month or $4,800 a year. If you feel like you need to make that price higher, again, that's your call, but you are, in doing this, both creating greater value for the client, and oh, by the way, you may want to do quarterly reviews, and you'll be in a position, if you have the client on a CAS engagement, to do a tax planning session with your client after you've got the September financial statements prepared. I can't tell you, when I was working in business development for firms, how many clients I was able to bring to the firms I was working for because they got the March 30th surprise, and their tax practitioner said to them, "Oh, by the way, you're going to have a six-figure tax liability this year." That doesn't happen if you're doing tax planning. Tax planning doesn't happen if you have financials. So there's some great value there, and that's looking internally to pick up clients that you've already got relationships with. You know, you certainly want to leverage referrals from your client base. And if you've got ongoing bookkeeping relationships and you can turn those into CAS engagements, that would be great. Some areas that I haven't traditionally looked at, because the firms that I worked for were either all or nothing when it came to CAS, is you may want to look at payables and expense tracking as separate and distinct outsourcing services for people, who maybe they have a spouse that does the financials, but they really don't want to deal with the payables and the expense tracking. So you set up Bill.com, you set up Expensify, you run that from the cloud, and you allow them access to those subsidiary ledgers so that they can run their own financial statements. Anyway, we're going to move on. Do we have another polling question, or am I getting ahead of myself?
I was going to say, can I disrupt you right now for a poll?
Absolutely.
Okay, bad joke. Okay, let's go ahead and put that on your screen. We have poll number 3. How many dedicated employees in your CAS practice? And this is poll number 3. We will have one more following this one. And don't forget, you can always put your questions in the questions panel. Okay, it looks like you guys are voting pretty quickly. Got about another 15 seconds on this poll, so make sure to get in your responses for your CPE credit. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and close this poll down in 3, 2, and 1. Poll is closing. Thank you for your responses. And Ed, it's back to you.
All right, we're getting in the home stretch here. So be a disruptor. And when I say be a disruptor, if you are contemplating starting a new practice and you have not had a CAS practice, don't necessarily build that practice around your bricks and mortar operation. And I say that I don't really have to talk about this in the post-COVID era, because many firms spent the bulk of their time after mid-March working remotely, working from home, working from wherever they could get a stable internet connection. I will say that many of the successful CAS practices that I have worked with and that our firm has worked with are fully remote. We have a client that mostly specializes in hospitality. They are using cloud-based solutions to serve their clients. They recently won a 12-location quick-serve restaurant franchise group out of Texas. They operate out of Ohio. One of the beautiful things about CAS is you are not tied to bricks and mortar, right? Or you don't have to be. Um, I recently met a firm, and I imagine they're struggling now. I first spoke with them prior to the pandemic, and they were a firm that specialized in commercial Airbnb properties. So, and those clients are literally all over the world. So don't get hung up on where your office is and having to serve people that are, either in a 50-mile radius of your office or within a 3-hour drive of your office. That's a holdover from, traditional deployment models for tax and assurance. The vast majority of the folks that I know that are running practices are doing stuff that's cloud based. So geography doesn't have to be a factor in how you build your practice. So it shouldn't be a factor in how you set up your staff. You may find from a cost perspective that having your team work from home allows them to be more efficient. Um, Many teams are more efficient that way because there are fewer distractions. It can lead to issues with team dynamics and cohesiveness, but it allows you the ultimate freedom. You're not tied to real estate. You don't have to share office space. When you need to grow, you don't have to worry about where you're going to put people. What it also means is that you can work with firms like ours if you have staff augmentation requirements, or you want to what I'd call right source. You want to put the right work with the right people. If you don't want your $80,000 staff senior doing bill.com entries and coding credit card transactions in Expensify, well, there you go. I've got some great people in Bali, Indonesia that can do that work for you for the equivalent of about $9 an hour. So um, think about it. Think about new ways of doing things. One of the other things I'll say to you is that there are I've seen some differences in some of the key performance indicators between traditional CAS only firms and CAS practices that are parts of CPA firms. And again, I think part of that is because a firm that's just set up to do accounting services isn't trying to retrofit that into a CPA firm model. So again, many of those firms are doing remote work. Many of those firms are supporting clients either nationwide or internationally because they've set up their firms to run completely virtually. Um, these firms typically tend to bill in advance and they bill monthly. So you're getting paid more quickly, which is always nice. They also tend to be a little bit more productive. One of the things that can happen in firms is if your tax team or your audit team is in their busy cycle and they need resources, they may borrow your people. What can also be an issue with CAS practices in many cases is you're starting this accounting service practice, but you're doing it with people who are tax managers or audit managers, so they have other responsibilities. And in many cases, that those other responsibilities get first priority, so that your accounting services clients may suffer in terms of turnaround. So all of those things can be factors. I didn't talk about it earlier, but from a staffing perspective, one of the things you want to do as quickly as you can is you want to build a dedicated team as quickly as you can. That way you don't have to share those resources. That way you don't have mission creep. So next up is think like a general manager. I would say that's probably true for most of the folks that have partner after their name, because they're thinking about not only the revenues, but they're thinking about how services are delivered and many other things. I don't know that he's gotten as much acclaim in the later part of his life, but many of you probably heard that Jack Welch, who was sort of a legendary leader of General Electric in the 80s, 90s, and into the early 2000s, passed away earlier this year. During his tenure at GE, it was one of the fastest growing, most profitable Fortune 1000 companies. out there. And he had a few guiding principles in his management style. First among them was, if you can't be number one or number two in a business, you don't belong in that business. I don't know that that's necessarily true with accounting firms or with accounting services practices, but excellence, good delivery of service, a solid, effective team, um, the efficiency and essentially building the economies of scale are really important in building an accounting services practice. They're each of the bullet points that I note here, I think, are important to building and maintaining a practice. Closing tools. Again, I don't really delve into technology in this presentation, but month-end closing tools, checklist, closing software, things that make the process of closing the month more streamlined are always things you want to think of as the leader of practice. We talked about KPIs and the value add that CAS practitioners typically provide their clients. These are important things that you need to be doing and thinking about as you're building your practice. Thinking we might, is it time for another polling question, Vaughn?
We can do one now. If that's where we would like to go for, let's go for it.
Sure.
We'll have our last poll. Let's go ahead and bring that on your screens. And poll number 4. I would like to explore outsourcing in, and then pick your time frame.
So do we have any more any more questions in queue, Vaughn?
We do. We have a couple. Let's see. Has the term write-up work been replaced by preparation financial statements?
I can't answer that because I'm not really a practitioner, but everyone I have talked to at firms lately, and not to be an ageist, but most of the people I talk to are partners or managing partners, and most of them are over 40, so they use the old terminology. I still hear people talk about CAS work as back office as well. It certainly makes sense to use a more current term like preparing trial balances or preparing for financial statements, but I have not heard that used in practice. But again, I don't work in the confines of a CPA firm, so I am not the authority on that.
All right, well, fantastic. We got our 4th and final poll open. So we're gonna go, it's been open for, oh wow, almost a minute and a half. So we're gonna go ahead and close this down in 3, 2, and 1. Okay, and we're in the home stretch. So get your questions in if you wanna have more answered at the very end. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne. I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but getting good tools, execution is step number 7. And what you really need to be in a mode of doing is setting up an assembly line to deliver financial statements and financial information to your clients. So any tools that you can use or any resources that you can use that allow you to do it more efficiently and more effectively, you need to look at investing in. In our firm, we try and aid in that efficiency and go to market cost by providing resources that can do the work at a much lower price. I will tell you that one of the clients I'm working with that now that busy season is over, I expect to be signing an engagement fairly soon, is looking at both using bots and AI as part of his technology stack, and he's also looking at potentially outsourcing some of that work with us. I know that Bill.com is looking to add some AI features and others other manufacturers, including Intuit, are looking at some of those tools as well. I don't know that those tools are all ready for prime time. I know of some practices that are using them effectively. But when you buy bots, you also have to have a bot keeper. So that's the flip side. And again, on the execution side, I would say in addition to making sure that you have good tools, make sure you have good teams. Those teams need to be led and encouraged and trained and developed. So you want to have a strong leadership structure for your team, and you want to have strong team members. Remember that you are delivering a service. Those include financial statements, but you want to make sure that the people that are talking with your clients are taking good care of them and that your clients are happy at the end of each of those transactions. So you want not only to look for technical skills, but for customer service skills. I'm going to give you a couple examples of some clients that we've worked with, some client success stories. I think these are great. This fintech firm is still a client today. We are still doing the services provided on the bottom of the slide for them on a daily basis. We don't do any financial statement preparation for them. So anything that falls into controllership or virtual CFO is still done by their direct hire team. But a lot of the bookkeeping and payables, receivables type work is done by our offshore team. And we have helped them grow significantly over the last 5 years. This is another firm that we've worked with. Again, they typically are providing CFO level support and controllership support for their small and medium business clients. We're doing a lot of the back end work, payables, receivables, and such. You'll find some additional resources on our website at Dynamis or dinam.is. You'll find a blog there. Haven't been as diligent about getting new content out there, but I would expect to see some new posts in the next week or two. If you have any actually questions, this is also a great place for us to address any of those as we are winding down.
Okay, well, we do have a couple more, and feel free, anybody out there, if you have any other questions, go ahead and put those into the questions panel and I will pass them along. Let's see. Does CPA.com have a webinar product since we can't go to an in-person seminar?
I know that they do webinars because I just saw, I'm connected with several people from CPA.com and I just noticed a post. So yes, I don't know if they're doing the 2-day workshop in a webinar format, but I would bet they are, since basically it's been mid-March since everybody went to work remote. I know that the AICPA conference this year is virtual. I'm a member of the Association of Accounting and Marketing. Our conference is virtual next month. So I can't say specifically what's available, but if you go to the CPA.com website, just do some surfing. I would bet you that stuff is there.
Okay, and it looks like we do have a attendee that has passed along a link to
Lovely.
a virtual client advisory services roadmap workshop. So I'm going to go ahead and put that into our chat.
Beautiful. Thank you.
And let me go ahead and put that in. So thank you, Trent. And I can also go ahead and just actually respond to it. There, into the questions panel as well. And it looks like we have another question from Robert. What is the difference between virtual CFO serviced and virtual controller services? or virtual CFO services and virtual controller services?
Okay, so in my mind, and this is my opinion, you may get a different answer. In my mind, controllership, virtual or otherwise, is all about preparing monthly financial statements. So it is, closing and doing journals for payables, receivables, payroll, benefits, the whole 9 yards, and actually preparing the monthly financial statements for the business, be that a nonprofit, a small business, or an SEC regulated firm. The CFO is a strategist. They certainly have oversight, usually a controller. If there is a CFO, the controller usually reports to the CFO. The CFO, though, is really, again, in my mind, in a strategic role with oversight of controllership, but is also looking at where the company needs to be in 24 to 36 months, making decisions about lines of credit, mergers and acquisition, that the CFO may have sight over IT and other areas, potentially HR. So I would say the biggest difference in my mind is controller is more tactical and hands-on, where the CFO is more strategic and visionary.
Okay, great. Well, it looks like that is all the questions that we have got in so far. So if there's anything else, just go ahead and please let me know. But Ed, if you have any other closing comments or any other things to wrap this up, we can go ahead and do that.
All right. Well, that is all I have. Thank you all for your time and attention. If I can be of assistance, feel free to reach out to me via email or social media. I will be getting out, as I said, in the next few days, a follow-up email. If you just want to talk about where you want to go with your practice, I'm happy to do a 15-minute consult and share some ideas. I've spent, as I said, most of my career in sales and marketing, and I've been focused on helping accounting firms grow since 2012. So if I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to do that.
All right, well, great. Well, thank you so much, Ed, for stopping by, and we really appreciate your time and sharing your expertise and all this fantastic information with our audience. I can see some thank yous and some fantastic webinars coming through in our questions panel. So if y'all don't mind, go ahead and jump on over to your inbox. You should have an evaluation waiting for you there. Just wanting to know what you thought of this session. So please go ahead and give that a little bit of attention, because of course we always welcome and appreciate your feedback. We will be processing your CPE credit, and that should be made available to you within the next 24 hours. So check your CPA Academy account out, and you'll get the recording of this session and the handouts as well. And all of Ed's contact information is in the handouts that you can go ahead and find in that account. So again, thank you guys so much for being here. We hope to see you all on some future webinars. Definitely check out our schedule on our website, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.